He threw up several times while she was there, but told her he was getting ready for his dinner, which was to be pork chops and pound cake. I know that's right. If I'm dying, goddammit, let me die with a pork chop and a pound cake in my mouth. Okay, y'all, look. So, I was doing the last book for the book club, and it was going to be Shaka Khan, right? I don't know why, but I'm having so much trouble getting this book. I don't know why. So, it's supposed to be on its way, supposedly. So, we're going to do the Patti Labelle book for February. And then hopefully the Shaka Khan book will be here like in the first or second week of February. Because that Shaka Khan book is a very expensive book to get or to come by. It's just a lot with that book. So if things go as planned, we'll start the Shaka Khan book in March. So this is the last video for the Sylvester book. We will be starting the Patti Labelle book on Monday. Maybe the paying club members over here on YouTube and Patreon will get it Sunday, maybe, but I'm going to appreciate this break that I have. Hopefully I can get it done so you guys can get it beforehand, because I love to give you like previews of the book before the rest of YouTube get it. All of you who have rode this Sylvester ride with me, I thank you so much for being loyal to me and the book club and being a fan of Sylvester. Sylvester and Rick moved into an apartment a bit higher up in the hills, which was properly theirs together rather than just Sylvester's alone. The place was sleek, modern, spacious, painted mostly white. It had its own elevator and a balcony off the back. At 39, Sylvester's boyhood dreams seemed to be coming true. The producer, narrator Michael Walden, had invited Sylvester and Jeannie Tracy to sing on Aretha Franklin's latest album. There he was, the boy who'd screeched over Aretha at discotheque parties, singing in the background on Freeway of Love. Knew you'd be a vision in white. How'd you get your pants so tight? His latest Megatone-produced album, Mutual Attraction, had been licensed and released by Warner Brothers. The Warner Brothers licensing agreement afforded more resources for production, so the sound of the album was cleaner and more professional than its predecessors. Warner Brothers managed to get Sylvester booked for New Year's Eve on The Late Show starring Joan Rivers. Sylvester had called in James Work to play guitar and lead the band and asked Jeannie Tracy and Martha Wash to sing backup. Martha Wash was too busy with her Weather Girls gigs, so Sylvester asked Charlene Moore, a friend of Martha's he'd met at a party. Another big girl who could sing. Bring your drag now, he said when he hired her. Charlene learned her part and bought a brand new blue sequined dress. Sylvester was very pleased. Wear that, he said. You look tough in that. At the sound check in the studios in Los Angeles, Jeannie and Charlene practiced their little dance steps in the mirrors on either side of the stage. From the green room, Rick, along for the ride, watched Sylvester, Jeannie, Charlene, and the band perform Someone Like You. Sylvester wore his high-blown red wig and black suit with big shoulder pads. He was fighting a cold, but the song went over just fine. The same year that Sylvester seemed to be reclaiming a battered throne, 12,016 people died of AIDS in the United States, about twice as many as had been killed by it the year before. The government predicted that the number would increase tenfold within 5 years. Back at the Grandview apartment, after a summer night of dancing in 1986, Sylvester was out of town. Jason Weaver saw Rick Kramer emerge from the shower. He looked unusually skinny. "Ricky, have you lost weight?" Jason asked, which among gay men at the time was an oblique way of asking whether someone had AIDS. "Yeah, a little bit," Rick said. He told Jason at great length that it was just because of job pressure and relationship troubles. Rick was frustrated, he said, with all of Sylvester's traveling, and his own affair with a gorgeous alcoholic had taken some unexpected turns. Hold the fuck on. So you telling Sylvester's sister, air quotes, that, "Child, I'm a little stressed out. That girl, I've been around there with that guy, or, queen, whatever. I've been around there secretly hunching. She's stressing me out. She ain't acting right, so I'm stressed out. Okay, you wouldn't have them problems if you just stayed your dick at home." He was smooth as silk, says Jason, and I knew I was being lied to, that he was sheltering me. Later, Jason found out that he was also being lied to about the extent of Rick's drug intake. Okay, they all did some drugs, but it turned out that Rick was doing huge quantities all weekend, the way some people do when there's something they want to erase or exorcise. A few months later, Jason was getting ready for a trip to Hawaii, and Rick invited him over. Sylvester was out of town again. Rick gave Jason some compilation tapes he had made, and then he went into his closet and pulled out several Hawaiian shirts, offering them to Jason. One of them, Jason thought, was the ugliest thing he'd ever seen. Jason declined, but Rick insisted. Jason was very uncomfortable taking all of those shirts, though at the time he was not quite sure why. People had started to talk after parties or warm weather events about how thin Ricky looked. If Sylvester saw the clues, he did not allow them into his consciousness. In early 1987, their friend and dentist, Steve Fornes, a brilliant dentist, but he had major drug problems, says Jason, sat Rick and Sylvester down. He had given them both their beautiful smiles. That day, he told them he'd detected thrush, a yeast infection in Rick's mouth. In late August 1987, Rick was admitted to San Francisco General. He had not told Sylvester or Jason or maybe anyone at all that he was sick. Sylvester was out of town, no doubt, relieved to have a break from a rocky phase of their relationship, but he came home right away. "Why didn't I know?" Sylvester asked Jason. "Why didn't he tell me?" Rick, thin as a rail, had a private room. Several of his friends, along with his parents, who had flown in from Michigan, stayed by his bed and prayed at the hospital chapel. On the evening of September 4th, 1987, the doctors told Sylvester, Jason, and Rick's parents that there was nothing they could do for Rick except give him morphine. Syl turned into a person I'd never seen before, Jason said. He read the Bible and rocked in his chair, saying over and over, "Ricky's dying, Ricky's dying." The doctors finally took Rick off life support. Rick's breathing slowed down and then ceased. He was 30. Rick had gone very, very quickly. He was here one moment and gone the next. Before Sylvester knew for sure that he too had AIDS, when he was just coughing and having some labored breathing, he went into the studio and recorded the vocals for a few songs that were to be on his next Warner Brothers album, a record that would remain unfinished. Sylvester and Jeannie were playing around with some songs. His voice was there, but it didn't sound right to him. The inspiration, the thing that makes you be fabulous, just wasn't coming, Sister Jeannie. My chops ain't right, honey, he said. I can't seem to make them run complete. Child, you know you can sing, Jeannie said. You better open up your mouth and sing. Without actually telling them, Sylvester started to let other people know what he now assumed to be true, that he had what he called the plague. That fall and winter of 1987, not well enough for a full tour, Sylvester tried his best to keep working. Money was tight. Tim McKenna occasionally still booked him at clubs around the Bay Area, but Sylvester was increasingly nervous about performing, as he could no longer be certain his voice would come through for him. A month later, Sylvester had sinus surgery, and after that he started to have fevers. In early December, at the end of a short tour, he performed at an AIDS benefit in Philadelphia. By the time his set was over, he was having trouble catching his breath. He flew back to San Francisco and was hospitalized with that doctors called a sinus infection. On one of the days Jeannie went to the hospital, Sylvester broke down and cried in her arms. The only other time Jeannie had seen Sylvester cried, she'd envied the tears. "We love each other, y'all," he'd said on stage at the Opera House, sniffling with Martha and Azura. "These women can sing, y'all. I tried so hard," he now said, sobbing. When Martha Wash came out from New York to visit Sylvester in the hospital, Jeannie told her very sternly not to cry. "Just hold it until you finish," she said. Martha went in and dished and laughed noisily with Sylvester, and as soon as she shut the door behind her, she broke down and wept. Sylvester weighed around 140 pounds when he left the hospital. Jeannie took care of him most days, singing for his spirit and cooking peach cobbler and macaroni and cheese for his body. But overwhelmed and burnt out, she told him she had to cut back to 3 days a week and suggested that he call his mother. Sylvester resisted. "I don't want my mother to go through it. She's going to go through it anyway, so you might as well have her here," Jeannie told her. "I am not your mother. I am your sister. I can't do what your mother can do for you." Pause. One thing that I will never, ever forget my mother telling me a few days before she died. I remember I was like, Ma, I think I'm going to be a couple of days late on my car note. She said, "Baby, you want me to pay it for you?" I said, "No, Mommy, I'm too grown for that." I think at the time I was like 30 something. I said, "Mommy, I don't need you to pay my car note no more." And she said to me, one of the last things she said to me before she died, "Suddenly, you will always need your mother, and she ain't never lied. This is the time that you need her, and she needs you." The next day, he called Sister Jeannie. He said, "Girl, my mother's coming." When Letha Hurd arrived, Sylvester finally told her he had been diagnosed with AIDS. She didn't know very much about HIV because that wasn't the thing that's normally discussed in Black families, she said later. But she had suspected that her son was suffering from something more serious than a sinus infection. In May 1988, after a hospital stay for pneumonia, Sylvester drafted his will. He left his silver and crystal to his sisters and mother, his deco furniture to Jeannie, his record collection to a friend named Jimmy, his ceramics to his old Los Angeles friend and hairstylist Baron Moliton. He left his diamond and sapphire rings that turns into a pair of clips, as the will puts it, to Christina and Alexandra Elite, one clip per girl. He left his royalties to Tim McKenna for a year, and then at Tim's death, or after 1 year, whichever comes first, to the AIDS Emergency Fund of San Francisco and the Rita Rocket Food Program. Tim McKenna would die in January 1990. To Jason Williams, he left his box of ivory, silver, and gold. There was even less left to will than he believed. Despite Sylvester's good intentions, the AIDS program would never see a nickel. According to Roger Gross, the lawyer who prepared the will, Sylvester would leave his life essentially broke. Most of the late fall of 1988, Sylvester spent at home in San Francisco in bed, on the phone or greeting a steady stream of visitors. When Marabasa came to see him, bearing memories of discotheque days, Sylvester was still walking, but his hair had gone from kinky to straight. He threw up several times while she was there, but told her he was getting ready for his dinner, which was to be pork chops and pound cake. I know that's right. If I'm dying, goddammit, let me die with a pork chop and a pound cake in my mouth. Thanks to Jeannie, even Patti Labelle stopped by. Sylvester had always gone to see her when she was performing in town, and a few years before she'd invited him on stage to sing "You Are My Friend" with her, claiming him from the stage as one of her girlfriends. Once, after a show at the Warfield, she had admired Sylvester's single, custom-made $300 shoulder-length sparkly earring, which had been delivered to him that very day, so he'd given it to her. He was way out there, and that's what I loved about him, she says. He said, "Take me or leave me," and most people took him. He sounded something like her, she thought, and often looked like a grown-up Patti LaBelle. Whenever I met him, it was pleasure to my eyes, she said, to see him all made up, looking better than me. The last time she saw him, though, Sylvester looked nothing like her. Jeannie Tracy had told her he was ill, laying it on thick because she knew how much Sylvester admired Patti. "Patti, go see him," she said. "I'll pick you up, Patti." "Oh, I'm so glad you're going to do it. Oh, my God, Sylvester loves you so much, and you know he's been abandoned. I really feel like if you go, it's going to be a boost. You might give him some more time to live. Just let him live a little longer, Patti. If you do this, oh my God, sometimes we have to be more than singers. Sometimes we have to be missionaries." Patti expressed concerns that it might hurt her singing that night. "You're going to sing better. You're going to sing better," Jeannie said. "I'm going to do this," said Patti LaBelle. Jeannie gave her the same orders she'd given Martha Wash. Just go in there and give him the latest dirt. Don't tell him he looks terrible, even though he's not going to look like Sylvester. Don't cry until you're out of his sight. Patti, Labelle, and Sylvester chatted for an hour, diva to diva. In the snapshot from the visit, Patti Labelle is leaning into Sylvester on a big white chair, her hand on his sweatpants leg and his hand around her waist, both smiling big. Sylvester's eyes are bright. "You did good," Jeannie told her when Patti Labelle came back out to the car. "He just looks like a little old man," Patti Labelle said. Some people complained after the ceremony that the service was too long and too preachy, but that was what Sylvester had said he wanted. As much as Sylvester wanted to exit movie fabulous, he wanted to have church. "Be yourself and do what you do on Sundays," he told Reverend Hawkins. He told Tony Elite that he was going to use the occasion to take people who almost never set foot in church and give them a sermon and the whole 9 yards. If Sylvester was here, Walter Hawkins told the crowd, he would not want us to be quiet. The church was full of music and racial impurity and gender confusion. Some people who were there remember churchgoers speaking in tongues. In fact, Sylvester was as much the preacher at his memorial as he was the glamorous corpse. "How do you want to be remembered?" the late radio DJ Frankie Crocker had asked Sylvester nearly a decade earlier, back when that was just a light, innocent job of a question about a distant future. "For being fabulous," Sylvester had answered without hesitation. And so it was.